She walked into her ex-husband's wedding wearing a sapphire dress worth more than his entire honeymoon. But that was not the shocking part. The shocking part was the man beside her, a billionaire who could buy everything Ryan Mitchell ever owned. And the 3 little children holding her hands, the same children Ryan had abandoned when they were still inside her womb. Every guest in that Beverly Hills ballroom expected Emily Carter to show up broken, desperate, maybe even begging. Ryan had planned it that way. He sent her the invitation not out of kindness, but as a trap, a public execution of the woman he threw away like garbage. He wanted her humiliation to be the highlight of his perfect evening. He got his wish for a highlight. But it was not Emily who ended up humiliated. What happened next inside that ballroom destroyed a marriage before the vows were even finished, exposed a fortune built entirely on stolen money, and ended with the groom being dragged out in handcuffs in front of every powerful person in the city. His new bride ripped off her diamond ring and ran. His investors pulled out overnight. His friends pretended they never knew him. And the woman he called worthless? She was the only one left standing. This is the story of Emily Carter, a mother of triplets who hit rock bottom and then turned her ex-husband's cruelest night into the beginning of her greatest life. This story carries a powerful truth. Your lowest moment is not your final chapter. Sometimes the people who try to destroy you are actually building the stage for your comeback. If you have ever been underestimated, betrayed, or counted out by someone who was supposed to love you, this story is for you. Stay until the very end, because the last 5 minutes will change how you see your own strength. Like this video right now so more women can hear Emily's message, and subscribe to this channel, because every story we tell here is built to remind you that you are far stronger than you think.
Before this grand entrance that stunned everyone, Emily Carter's life was one of hardship and struggle. She did not come from a wealthy family. She was raised in a modest part of Phoenix by her single mom, who held down 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Emily grew up appreciating the small comforts, like hot dinners, used clothing, and a love shown through action, not expensive gifts. At 22, she thought she met her prince, Ryan Mitchell. He was a successful, charming, and older man who knew all the right things to say. To Emily, he seemed like her rescuer. He offered her a world she had only dreamed of, one with security, comfort, and a real family. Ignoring her mother's concerns, Emily married him. At first, their life together felt perfect. Ryan showered her with gifts, made grand promises, and claimed to love her trusting nature. Emily, a true romantic, devoted herself to being the ideal spouse. She quit her receptionist job to help his career, ran their household perfectly, and managed his entire life. To her, love was about giving everything. She believed her dedication was all that mattered. But as Ryan got richer and more powerful, he grew colder. He started seeing Emily not as a wife, but as a burden. Then Emily learned she was pregnant, a discovery that brought her incredible happiness and hope. It also exposed Ryan's cruel side. Instead of celebrating, he mocked her. He coldly asked how she could support 3 babies when she could not even support herself, because destiny had a surprise in store. Emily was having triplets. This blessing quickly turned into her biggest challenge. The doctor's fees, the crushing tiredness, and the constant worry were all hers to bear alone. Ryan disappeared. He stopped returning home or answering her calls, and finally, he threw her out with just a single bag and a shattered heart. While he showed off his wealth with fancy clothes and luxury cars, Emily was on a friend's sofa. She would hold her pregnant stomach and make silent vows to her unborn children that she would always keep them safe. Her nights were endless, and her tears were constant. She took any job she could find, cleaning buildings and doing laundry, saving every cent for her babies. Strangers would look at her, some with pity, others with scorn. Her body was sore, and her heart was heavy, but she refused to give up. Each little movement inside her was a reminder that this battle was for them. She had to be strong, for the three lives depending on her. After she gave birth to two sons and a daughter, everything changed. She was twice as tired, but also twice as brave. As she rocked her children to sleep, she would quietly cry and sing old family songs. She would feed them first, often going hungry herself to make sure they ate. Life was incredibly difficult, but her love for them gave her immense strength. People saw her as a pathetic, abandoned woman. Ryan made fun of her struggle, but Emily had something better than wealth. She had grit. It was that grit, forged in hardship and strengthened by love, that turned her arrival at Ryan's wedding into a victory, not a defeat. The timid girl he left behind had grown into a powerful woman he could not break. The Beverly Hills Grand Hotel was more like a palace. The main ballroom was enormous, with towering marble columns and massive crystal chandeliers. The entire event was crafted to be an extravagant display. Ryan Mitchell's wedding was meant to shout his success and status to the world. He needed everyone to see that he had reached the pinnacle, leaving his humble beginnings and his broke ex-wife in the dust. Expensive invitations had gone out weeks before to the city's most important people, investors, public figures, and industry leaders. The wedding was all over the society pages, called the biggest event of the year. The press gathered at the entrance, eager to photograph every lavish moment. A long line of luxury cars dropped off guests in designer clothes that were worth a fortune. The room was filled with fake smiles and endless toasts. Servers offered fancy seafood as a small orchestra played classical music. At the front of it all was Ryan, with that self-satisfied look of a man who thinks he is a king. His arm was wrapped tightly around Vanessa, a vision in her expensive dress, sparkling with jewels and arrogance. Vanessa, who was 26, loved being the center of attention. She had been an unknown model, but now she was marrying into millions. She clung to Ryan, whispering to him with a smirk, acting like she owned the place. She adored the cameras, and they adored her back. She was aware of the gossip about Emily, but it did not bother her. In fact, she wanted Emily to be there. Vanessa could not wait to watch her fall apart in front of everyone. Ryan's friends patted his shoulder, telling him he had traded up. The guests toasted not only the marriage, but also their business partnerships and future profits. In this opulent room, everything was for sale, including love and respect, and Ryan enjoyed every moment. He lifted his glass and announced that he was burying his past for a future of pure success. The reality was, he invited Emily for a specific reason. He wanted to put on a performance. He needed to show everyone how high he had climbed while she had fallen so low. Her humiliation would be the ultimate proof of his greatness. A few guests who knew about the nasty divorce laughed about Emily showing up in a cheap dress, looking weak and defeated. Ryan had joked that she would probably beg for money, and it would be hilarious. The music grew louder, signaling the start of the ceremony. The wedding officiant was in place, the flower. Arrangements smelled wonderful, and the room was full of excitement. But under all that sparkle, there was a feeling of suspense. The main question was whether Emily would appear. Near the large entrance, the crowd suddenly grew quiet. A parking attendant ran in and spoke quietly to the head waiter. The orchestra stumbled, and all eyes moved to the entrance in silent expectation. Ryan grinned, thinking his plan was working perfectly. Vanessa's smile grew, eager for the drama to unfold. The guests watched, hungry for a scene. No one there realized the woman walking in was not the sad victim they all imagined. She was a force of nature, ready to destroy their shallow world. Ryan Mitchell had perfected the art of— It was a complete lie. To everyone in that fancy ballroom, he seemed like the perfect groom, handsome and successful, a man who had everything, including a beautiful young wife. But under that tuxedo was a man whose ambition was built on pure cruelty. Ryan's climb to the top was not just about hard work. It was a path he carved out of betrayal and broken promises. When he first married Emily, he had a small salary and huge dreams. Her quiet support and her sacrifices gave him a foundation. But the second his career took off, he started seeing her as a burden. He would make fun of her simple clothes and mock her for not fitting in with the wives of his rich friends. He shot down every attempt she made to keep their family strong. When Emily told him she was pregnant with triplets, the mask came off completely. His eyes were not filled with joy, but with cold calculation. 3 kids meant more bills, more work, and less time to chase his own selfish desires. "You have destroyed my life," he screamed one night, slamming the door while she collapsed and cried. After that, he was barely ever home. His excuses became more and more ridiculous until he finally kicked her out. To him, Emily was just a mistake he needed to erase. Then came Vanessa Brooks, his shiny new replacement. Vanessa was the exact opposite of Emily, at least in Ryan's mind. She was young, stylish, and ran in wealthy circles. To the world, she was a model on the rise, always seen at parties with a glass of champagne. But behind the designer dresses was a woman just as cold-hearted as Ryan. She did not see love in him. She saw an opportunity. With Ryan, she could lock down the life she always wanted: the diamonds, the fancy boats, the mansion parties. It was Vanessa who told Ryan to show off his new life and who sneered whenever Emily's name was mentioned. "Invite her," she whispered when they started planning the wedding. "Let her see what she's missing. Let the whole world see your upgrade." Her cruelty was not just about feeling better than Emily. It was about destroying any possible threat to her new title as Mrs. Mitchell. Together, Ryan and Vanessa were a perfect disaster of ego and greed. They boosted each other's vanity, ignoring the gossip all around them. Some of their guests thought they were bold. Others just saw a train wreck waiting to happen. But Ryan and Vanessa did not care at all. They thought they were above it all, that they could live a life of luxury without any consequences. As Ryan showed off Vanessa around the room, his laugh was empty, but his ego grew with every jealous look he got. He loved the idea of Emily showing up, looking worn out and sad, proving to everyone he made the right choice. Vanessa held his arm tightly, her diamond bracelet sparkling, her eyes shining with a mean sort of excitement. They were sure they had written the perfect story. Emily was the sad victim, Ryan was the conquering hero, and Vanessa was the ultimate prize. But the tale they were trying to tell was about to fall apart, because the woman they called weak was no longer that person, and the life they were so proud of was built on shaky ground, ready to be washed away. And tonight, the tide was coming in. The scheme to embarrass Emily was not just Ryan's idea. It was a plan they hatched together, whispering in their penthouse late at night. While designers were arranging flowers and planners were setting schedules, Ryan and Vanessa were plotting something awful. "Are you certain she will show up?" Vanessa asked one night, sipping champagne as they looked out at the city lights. "She will come," Ryan answered without a doubt. "Emily is too proud to just ignore it. And even if she tries, her curiosity will get the best of her. She will have to see me, to see everything she lost." Vanessa smiled a wicked smile. "Good, because the second she walks in, she will know she does not belong, and so will everyone else." They played the scene over and over in their minds. Ryan pictured Emily sneaking in, wearing an old dress, maybe holding a cheap purse. He imagined her standing by herself in a corner of the ballroom, while cameras flashed, taking pictures of him and Vanessa in her stunning gown. It would be a perfect, silent judgment that made Emily look pitiful and Vanessa look triumphant. But Vanessa needed more than that. She wanted to completely crush her. "Let us make sure the reporters see her," she said. "I will point them in her direction. We can pose for photos with her standing right next to us, totally invisible. She will be like a ghost from your past, haunting your new, successful life." Ryan thought it was a brilliant idea. "And after we say our vows, I will give a toast," he said, "something classy, thanking the people who stood by me when others could not. Everyone will know it is about her. They will laugh into their drinks, and she will fall to pieces." Their plan got more vicious with every detail. Vanessa giggled, picturing Emily in tears. Ryan smiled, imagining his ex-wife crumbling under the spotlight of his fake victory. For them, this wedding was not about love. It was about control, about showing the world that they had won and Emily had lost. Even the seating chart was part of their mean-spirited game. Ryan told the event planner to save an empty chair in the back, just in case the ex-wife shows up. He made sure the catering staff knew, too. Vanessa, with a cruel glimmer in her eye, made sure that the table nearest that chair was full of the biggest gossips she knew, who would start spreading rumors immediately. By the wedding day, their trap was ready. Ryan looked at himself in the mirror, fixing his cufflinks and admiring his reflection. Tonight, he thought, I finally get rid of her for good. Vanessa, as she put on her dress, whispered, "And tonight I become the only Mrs. Mitchell that matters." Neither of them had any idea that their perfect stage, dripping with gold and champagne, was about to come crashing down, because Emily was not walking into their trap as the defeated woman they remembered. She was walking in with a new kind of strength, and with powerful friends who could turn their cruel game into their own personal nightmare. The trap they had set for Emily was about to spring shut, but it was going to catch them, not her. The night before the wedding, Emily sat on her old couch in her tiny apartment, holding her head in her hands. The room was dark, except for one small lamp, which made long shadows dance on the peeling paint. Toys were all over the floor, baby bottles were on the counter, and she could hear the soft cries of her triplets coming from the other room. She rocked back and forth, feeling a deep, bone-tired exhaustion. Life had been incredibly hard since Ryan kicked her out. She barely made ends meet, working odd jobs just to buy groceries. She cleaned buildings late at night, folded laundry at a laundromat in the afternoon, and watched neighbors' kids whenever she got the chance. Her hands were raw from harsh cleaning supplies. Her back was always sore from being on her feet, and her eyes stung from lack of sleep. It felt like the world loved to remind her that she had failed. Old friends stopped answering her calls, gossiping that she tried to marry into a world where she did not belong. Strangers would stare at her belly, and later at her stroller, with judging eyes. 3 kids, no husband, and no money. Even at the supermarket, she felt the shame of people's pity when she had to use food stamps for baby formula. That evening, after putting her children to bed, she could not hold back her tears anymore. "I promise you, my sweet babies," she whispered, gently moving the hair from their faces, "I will not let you grow up feeling unwanted. I will break before I ever let you feel what it is like to be abandoned." But on the inside, she was already breaking. The wedding invitation from Ryan was on her kitchen table, its fancy gold edges mocking her in the dim light. She had almost ripped it up when it first came. But there it was, a constant, cruel reminder that while she was struggling, Ryan was living a life of pure luxury, celebrating his new happiness. She knew this invitation was not an act of kindness. It was an act of cruelty. He wanted her to be there so he could humiliate her. She held the invitation against her chest and cried, feeling torn between anger and hopelessness. Part of her wanted to just burn it and deny him the pleasure. But a small, quiet voice inside her knew she could not hide forever. She had spent far too long avoiding the world and its opinions. Maybe this was her chance to finally face it, no matter how much it hurt. But she was terrified. She pictured herself walking into that ballroom in her simple dress, holding her children, with every single person staring and judging her. She could hear their laughter piercing through her like 1,000 tiny needles. She could see Ryan's smug look, Vanessa's nasty smile, and hear the guests whispering, "There is the poor ex-wife. Look how low she has sunk." Her chest ached with shame. She did not think she had the strength to go through with it. That night, as rain tapped on the window, Emily curled up on the couch and let all her sadness wash over her. She cried so hard her throat was sore until she finally fell into a troubled sleep. In her nightmares, she saw Ryan's face sneering at her, calling her a nobody. She saw Vanessa covered in jewels, laughing at her, and she saw herself all alone, completely broken and invisible. Emily did not realize it then, but the storm raging inside her was the same fire that would soon guide her into that ballroom, not as a victim, but as a force that neither Ryan nor Vanessa could ever hope to control, because hitting rock bottom was not her final chapter. It was the very beginning of her comeback. The morning sun barely made it through the thin curtains of Emily's apartment, showing the bone-deep exhaustion on her face. Sleep had been a luxury, her thoughts trapped between the dread of being shamed and the deep, simmering anger inside her. Her triplets began to stir, their little hands reaching up, a constant reminder of why she fought so hard. She leaned over to kiss them, making promises she feared she could not fulfill. A sharp rap on the door made her jump. She paused, pulling her frayed sweater around herself. She never had visitors. When she opened it, she couldn't move. Alexander Harrington was standing right in her hallway. Emily knew who he was. The entire city did. He was the city's phantom billionaire, a man who only surfaced for major charity functions. Tall, with broad shoulders and eyes that held old battles, Alexander was someone people both respected and feared. His name was in the papers for massive business deals and generous hospital wings. She never imagined he would show up at her apartment. "Emily Carter." His voice was low and sure. "I hope this is not a bad time." She just numbly nodded. "Yes, I am, Emily. But what are you doing here?" His eyes looked past her, taking in the small apartment, the scattered toys, the clear signs of her daily battle. His jaw clenched for a second. He looked back at her. "Because I am aware of what he did, and I have seen this happen before." Emily went rigid, her guard instantly up. "If Ryan sent you here." "Ryan did not send me," Alexander cut in, his tone firm. "I am here because I saw my own mother endure what you are going through now. My father left when she got sick. She died from cancer all alone. Years later, my wife," his voice caught for a moment before he pushed onward. "My wife also battled cancer. I tried everything, but in the end, I lost her. I understand how it feels to see that someone you care for destroyed by cruelty, and I promised myself I would never let it happen again if I could stop it." Emily's breathing hitched. The edge in his voice was not pity. It was the sound of pain that had been carved into him by his own life. "I do not want your charity," she whispered, hating the weakness in her own voice. Alexander simply shook his head. "This is not about charity. This is about justice. Ryan believes he can show off his cruelty and face no penalty. He is mistaken. You are not in this fight by yourself." She looked at him, her mind torn between utter disbelief and a flicker of hope she had long since buried. Why would a man of his standing and influence ever bother with her problems? But his eyes held no judgment or amusement, just a deep understanding, as if her own hurt was reflected back at him. "I cannot go to that wedding," Emily said, her voice cracking. "Not looking like this. Not when he expects me to crumble." "Then do not enter as his victim," Alexander said softly. "Enter as the woman he completely misjudged. I will personally see to it." The conviction in his voice was solid as steel. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a tiny bit of her old strength flickered back to life inside her. She did not know it then, but this man, forged by his own grief and compassion, was about to make Ryan's celebration the very scene of his public disgrace. And Alexander Harrington only fought battles he knew he would win. The days before Ryan's wedding were a complete haze for Emily. She was torn between looking after her triplets and fighting off the doubts that filled her mind. She kept asking herself if she had made a terrible choice in accepting Alexander's help. The invitation sat on her table, a constant reminder of Ryan's coldness. He wanted to see her shamed. He wanted to see her fall apart. But Alexander Harrington was not someone who made promises lightly. On the wedding day, a gleaming black limousine was parked right outside her building. Emily could only stare from her window, holding her children tightly. Her neighbors started to peek out from their own doors, whispering among themselves. For once, she was not leaving her apartment pushing a stroller, her face etched with worry. She was walking towards something incredible. "Emily," Alexander said, holding out his hand to her, "this day is not about him. It is about you taking back your self-respect. Allow me to help you remind the world of the person you are." Inside the limo, the leather seats were pristine. Gentle music played, and a stylist stood ready with a selection of gowns. Emily let out a small gasp. "This is far too much. I cannot accept." Alexander just shook his head. "You have sacrificed more than enough. Let me be the one to give for a change." The stylist helped her look through the dresses, each one more beautiful than the one before. Emily was nervous at first, her hands shaking as she touched the expensive fabrics. But as she put on a gown the color of a deep blue sapphire, everything changed. The material fit her perfectly. The rich color made her eyes sparkle, and for once, she did not see a worn-out mother in the reflection. She saw a new woman. Her kids, in their little tuxedos and adorable dresses, began to clap their hands excitedly. "Mommy, you are a real princess," one of her sons yelled out, his voice full of genuine wonder. Tears started to form in Emily's eyes as she gave them a hug. They had only known her in old clothes with a tired expression. Tonight, they were seeing her true strength. The makeup artist erased the signs of her sleepless nights. Her hair was styled in soft waves. A diamond necklace, a quiet gift from Alexander, lay against her skin, sparkling in the light. She touched it with a nervous hand, but he just said, "Think of it as your armor." As the car drove toward the Beverly Hills Grand Hotel, Emily's anxiety grew. She pictured Ryan's smug expression, Vanessa's mocking laugh, the quiet murmurs of the guests. Her hands grew damp with nervousness. Alexander saw her distress. "Do you know why a storm is so powerful, Emily?" he asked in a low voice. She gave him a confused look. "It does not ask for permission. It simply shows up. Tonight, you are the storm." A shaky laugh escaped her. For so long, she had been trying to be invisible, just to get by, but not tonight. Tonight, she would enter that ballroom, not as the ex-wife Ryan had thrown away, but as the woman he was about to meet for the very first time. The car came to a stop in front of the brilliantly lit hotel. A crowd of photographers was gathered near the entrance, cameras flashing for every car that arrived. The instant the limousine door was opened, the entire crowd went silent. Emily emerged, looking stunning, with her children behind her like a royal procession, and Alexander by her side, a picture of calm authority. For the first time in a very long time, people were not mocking her. They were staring in wonder, and inside, Ryan's perfect wedding was about to turn into his worst nightmare. The Beverly Hills Grand Hotel was a palace of shimmering gold. That evening, guests moved through the grand ballroom dressed in their finest, their voices bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played softly, while waiters served endless champagne. For the city's most important people, it was another night of showing off. But that was about to change. The large golden doors to the ballroom swung open with a dramatic slowness, and the music was suddenly broken by the sound of 100 people gasping at once. Outside, a long black limousine had arrived, its perfect finish catching the light from the cameras. Photographers surged forward, shouting questions into the night. Who could it be? Who is this? And then she appeared, Emily Carter. She was no longer the exhausted mother barely making ends meet. She was no longer the forgotten ex-wife that Ryan expected her to be. Tonight, she was absolutely breathtaking. Her sapphire dress seemed to glow with each movement. Her hair fell in gentle curls, and the diamond at her neck shined like a star. Her posture was perfect. Her chin was high, her gaze was steady and strong. She moved with the confidence of a queen who had overcome all of her fears. The whispers started to rise. Is that really her? Ryan's ex. She looks amazing. I heard she was having a hard time, but Emily was not by herself. Next to her was Alexander Harrington, the mysterious billionaire who could command a room with his presence alone. His suit was perfectly cut, and his hand rested on her back in a gentle, protective way. Seeing him with her sent a jolt through the entire party. Guests began whispering to each other. Why is he with her? Alexander never appears with anyone at these things. What is going on? And then came the masterstroke. 3 little children stepped out of the limousine. It was Emily's triplets, the boys in tiny tuxedos, and the girl in a glittering dress. They had wide, innocent eyes and looked so proud. They held their mother's hands, not understanding the sensation they were causing. The gasps were replaced by a shocked quiet. Hushed words flew across the room. Those must be his children. They are the image of Ryan. Oh my God, he left them. Across the ballroom, Ryan's smug smile was frozen in place. The champagne glass in his hand started to shake. For the past few weeks, he had been telling everyone how pathetic Emily would look if she actually came. But watching her enter with a billionaire and 3 undeniable reminders of his own actions, he was the one who was being humiliated. Vanessa's face grew tight, her perfect smile beginning to crack. She grabbed Ryan's arm, her fingernails pressing into the fabric of his jacket. What is she doing here? And with him? She hissed. The musicians in the orchestra began to stumble over their notes as they all turned to look at the entrance. The ballroom, which had been full of idle chatter, was now completely silent with anticipation. Every single person watched as Emily walked onto the marble floor, the sound of her heels like a drumbeat. Emily took her time. She did not look away. She moved with a calm assurance. Her eyes were locked straight ahead, ignoring the whispers and Ryan's shocked expression. She had not come to play the part of the victim. She had come to get her dignity back. And as the doors shut behind her, there was only one clear truth in the room. It was suddenly obvious to everyone in the dazzling ballroom. The woman they came to feel sorry for had shown up as someone they could only look up to. A tense silence fell over the hall, feeling fragile and ready to break. Emily stood proudly in a sapphire dress, with Alexander beside her and the triplets holding her hands. The whispers started to swell, a mix of shock and gossip. Ryan felt every eye shift from him and Vanessa to the woman he had tried to ruin. Anger flared inside him. This was not how he had imagined this moment. She was meant to look pathetic, fragile, and in need. Instead, she was commanding all the attention. His ego demanded he do something. He walked forward, stretching his lips into a smile and lifting his glass. "Well, well," he announced, his voice carrying over the marble floor. "Look who finally decided to appear. My former wife. How sweet." The guests stirred with discomfort, as his tone was laced with poison wrapped in a charming package. Vanessa held his arm tighter, her smirk egging him on. Ryan moved in, stalking around Emily. "So tell me, Emily, did you have to rent that dress? Or did Mr. Harrington here pay for it? That must feel strange, right? Coming into a place like this, after living in that— what was it? A shabby little apartment." A few chuckles broke out from the guests, who were hesitant and uncertain. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she held his gaze. She was about to speak, but Alexander's firm hand on her back stopped her. His steady look told her, "Wait." Ryan had more to say. He leaned in, his voice becoming sharper. "And you brought the children? Honestly, Emily, was that to get sympathy? Or were you hoping someone here would feel sorry enough to give you some money?" A quiet gasp went through the crowd. The sheer nastiness of his words was shocking and hung in the air. The triplets held onto Emily even more tightly, feeling the bad energy. For a second, Emily felt the familiar shame creep back, the old sting of his insults. But then she met Alexander's gaze, which was strong and steady, and she recalled that she was not by herself. Before she could answer, Alexander took a step forward. His voice was quiet but held a power that made the entire room go silent. "You mentioned pity, Mr. Mitchell," he said, looking straight at him. "But the person I see here is not a woman who needs to be pitied. I see a woman who has survived more than you could ever imagine. And she did it all with grace." Ryan's smile wavered, but he made himself laugh. "And what gives you the right to lecture me?" Alexander's mouth formed a cold smile. "I am the man who is here with her after you decided to leave. I am the man who appreciates her worth when you threw it away. And am the man who will make sure everyone learns the truth about the kind of husband you really were." The room filled with excited chatter. Vanessa turned pale, feeling the mood change. Ryan's perfect facade broke, and anger showed on his face. "This is my wedding," he yelled. "You have no place here." Emily finally moved forward, her voice strong and unwavering. "No, Ryan, you are mistaken. I have more of a right to be here than you know. Because while you enjoy this new life, you can never forget me or the children you left behind. We are a constant reminder of the person you actually are." Gasps echoed around the room. The guests looked at him, their expressions now filled with judgment. Ryan tried to respond, but he could not find any words. For the very first time, he was the one without a comeback. And in that quiet moment, his carefully constructed world of deceit started to fall apart. The ballroom was alive with nervous chatter, the atmosphere thick with suspense. Emily's statement had been a shock, but it was Alexander who was now directing the chaos. Standing confidently, his demeanor exuded a calm power. All eyes were fixed on him. Ryan's jaw was clenched. "That is enough," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "This show is over. Security." But Alexander just lifted a hand, making him quiet without effort. "Before you attempt to have her removed, Mr. Mitchell," he said calmly, "you should probably be concerned about what I brought along with me tonight." The guests moved restlessly, their interest spreading like fire. People stretched their necks, hoping for more excitement. The musicians had even stopped playing, their bows still in the air. Ryan tried to laugh. "And what is it that you have brought? More pity? More empty words? This is my evening, Harrington, not yours." Alexander's look grew more intense, his voice calm but deadly. "What I have," he stated, getting something from his coat pocket, "is the truth." He took out a thin black folder and set it down on a table nearby. The room became even quieter. With slow and steady movements, he opened it, showing the papers inside. "These," Alexander said, his voice loud enough for all to hear, "are financial documents. Documents which show that Ryan Mitchell has been stealing money from his own company for more than 2 years." A wave of gasps went through the room. Glasses hit marble as people looked at each other in disbelief. Some took out their phones and started typing, eager to share the news. Ryan's face went pale. "That is not true," he yelled. "Those are all made up. He is trying to ruin my name." But Alexander continued. "They are not made up. They are confirmed. Bank payments sent to accounts overseas, front companies to hide the losses, and stolen money used for your own life, vacations, cars, and even for this wedding." He stopped for a moment, looking directly at Ryan. "You wanted Emily to come here so you could shame her, but what you really did was invite her to watch you fall." Vanessa grabbed Ryan's arm, fear showing in her eyes. "Ryan, is this real?" she asked quietly. "Of course it is not," he snapped, pulling his arm away from her. "He's just bluffing." Alexander leaned in, his voice cutting above the noise. "Bluffing? If so, then why, Ryan? Why do I have letters signed by you and your accountant? And why do I have recordings of your phone calls giving permission for these payments?" The room buzzed with talk once more. Investors started to look worried, their faces becoming serious. Politicians began to move toward the doors, trying to get away. Even Ryan's best friends looked away, not wanting to be dragged down with him. Emily stood, perfectly still, her heart beating fast. For so long, she had wished for Ryan to finally pay for his actions, for everyone to see the cruelty that she had to live with. And right now, in this beautiful ballroom, justice was being served right in front of her. Ryan's composure shattered entirely. Sweat formed on his forehead, his voice getting louder with panic. "This is all a trick. He is just trying to destroy me. You all know who I am. I built my business with hard work." But nobody was buying it now. His voice, which used to be so powerful, now sounded empty, frantic and sad. Alexander stood up straight, closing the folder with a sense of finality. "Hard work does not create a trail of millions of stolen dollars, Mr. Mitchell. Your business is based on lies, and this evening, those lies are over." For a second, the ballroom was quiet, the weight of the truth weighing on everyone. Then, a guest near the front betted just loud enough to be heard, "He is done for." And in that instant, everything changed. The man who had planned a night to shame his ex-wife was now left exposed and shaking, his business falling apart in front of the same people he wanted to impress. And every single person in that beautiful ballroom understood. They were no longer at a wedding. They were witnessing a complete collapse. The room was full of noise and confusion. Murmurs became angry words, and looks of admiration turned into looks of total disgust. Ryan Mitchell, who just a short time ago was on top of the world he had created, was now coming undone before the very people he had tried to win over. And next to him, Vanessa Brooks, his radiant new wife, felt her perfect life start to crumble. In the beginning, she was motionless, holding his arm as if his power could still protect her. But as Alexander's words became clearer, and the papers were passed around, the truth could not be ignored. The fortune she thought she was gaining was just stolen money, a deck of cards about to fall. Her hand let go of him. She looked from one guest to another, seeing the judgment and scorn in their eyes. The whispers felt worse than any physical pain. She had to have known. A total gold digger. She only wanted him for his money, and now he has nothing. Vanessa felt sick to her stomach. This was not the future she had signed up for. She had not given up her best years and her dreams to stand next to a man with nothing. She had dreamed of luxury yachts, being on magazine covers, fancy parties, and a future filled with diamonds, not court dates for bankruptcy and trips to a prison. "Ryan," she said in a low voice, her perfect tone cracking with fear, "please tell me this is not real. Tell me he is not telling the truth." Ryan's face contorted, panic eating away at him. "Of course it is not real. You cannot listen to him." But she could already see the sweat on his face, the shaking of his hands, and the hollowness in his gaze. She had seen men try to bluff before, and she could tell the difference between real confidence and a total breakdown. Vanessa took a quick step away from him, her shoes clicking on the floor. Her movement caused more gasps. Ryan's head turned quickly toward her. "What do you think you are doing?" "I am not sinking with you," she declared, her voice now louder, unsteady, but loud enough for all to hear. "I did not agree to be married to a thief." The guests reacted loudly, some with surprise, others with a knowing satisfaction. For the first time all evening, it was not Emily or Alexander who brought Ryan shame. It was the woman he picked instead of his wife. "Vanessa," Ryan yelled, his voice breaking, "you cannot just walk away from me. You think you can manage without me? You are nothing without me." But Vanessa had already pulled the diamond ring off her finger. She raised it so everyone could see, her expression cold and distant. "Your name means nothing anymore." And after saying that, she let the ring fall to the marble floor. It made a sharp noise that echoed in the shocked quiet. Ryan moved toward her, his face turning red with rage. With rage? "You are so ungrateful." But security guards, feeling the mood shift, moved in between them. Vanessa spun away, her gown flowing behind her, her heels clicking like tiny explosions as she raced out of the ballroom. Photographers hurried after her, their flashes capturing her betrayal for the morning news. Ryan just stood there, his chest tight. His bride had vanished, his business was exposed, and his reputation was ruined in front of everyone. And Emily saw it all, her children clutching her hands. For so long, she had endured Ryan's cruelty, the humiliation of being cast aside. But tonight, before this crowd, the man who tried to erase her was being erased himself. And the blade that cut the deepest was not held by Emily or Alexander. It was held by the very woman Ryan thought would complete his victory. The ballroom had never been so quiet. Vanessa's footsteps had just faded when every person turned to look at Ryan, and then at Emily. She stood calmly in her blue dress, her triplets held close to her. The audience waited, holding its breath, knowing that the real drama was just beginning. Ryan scrambled to get a grip. He adjusted his tuxedo and let out a forced, harsh laugh. "You people are all idiots," he sneered. "Do you actually believe these lies? This is all just bitterness." Bitterness from an angry ex-wife and a rich man with nothing better to do. "Remember that she is nobody without me." Emily's grip tightened on her children's hands. For so long, his words had felt like poison. Nobody without me. They had haunted her during long, sleepless nights, in the quiet of hospital rooms and through the tiring hours she spent at low-wage jobs to provide for her kids. But this evening, with all these people watching, she knew she was not afraid of his words anymore. Tonight, she was going to tell her own story. She took a step forward, her voice a little shaky at first, but it grew stronger as she spoke. You claim I am nothing without you, Ryan, but the reality is I became my own person without you. A soft sound moved through the room. Emily held her head high, her eyes shining. When you forced me to leave, I was pregnant, not with a single baby, but with 3 of them. She stopped, bringing her children forward so everyone could see their sweet faces. These are your children, Ryan. You abandoned me to care for them all by myself. Gasps filled the elegant ballroom. A woman in the front row touched her necklace, whispering, "Oh my goodness, he left his own children." Emily's voice trembled with emotion, but she continued. While you were enjoying fancy dinners, I was cleaning offices at night, doing laundry, and watching other people's kids. My hands were raw from the harsh cleaning products. My back hurt, my body was worn out, but I never gave up. I did it for them, not for me. She looked down at her children with loving eyes. Every tear I held back, every time I went hungry, every night I could not sleep. It was all to make sure they never felt unwanted, to make sure they never thought they were a burden. The room started to blur as tears welled in her eyes. She let them stream down her face. You said I destroyed your life, Ryan, but these children did not destroy mine. They rescued it. They gave me the strength to get up when you tried to crush me. And tonight, I am done hiding them. I am done hiding my suffering. The world needs to hear the truth. You did not just betray me, you betrayed them too. The crowd exploded with anger, their voices talking over one another. That's awful. How could he do that to his own family? She raised them by herself while he was living it up. Ryan's face twisted in panic, sweat dripping down his face. She is lying, he yelled, his voice full of desperation. Those kids! How can anyone be sure they are mine? But as he said it, the resemblance was obvious. The same strong jaw, the same intense, dark eyes. The gasps turned into sure whispers. No one doubted Emily anymore. Alexander moved closer, placing his hand on Emily's shoulder, his voice steady. She has nothing to prove. Anyone can see the truth, and the truth will survive every lie you have ever told. Emily's tears shone in the light of the chandeliers, but her voice was firm as she spoke her final piece. You tried to make me disappear, Ryan, but you can never erase yourself in these children. They are living proof of the man you are, and the father you were not. The room filled with applause, and some guests even stood up, their faces wet with tears. Emily's story had broken through the glamorous surface, revealing the raw truth hidden under all the money and deception. And in that moment, it was not Ryan's money or Alexander's influence that held the room's attention. It was Emily's honesty. The ballroom was filled with noise, shocks, and accusations as the scandal spread like a wildfire. Emily's words had ripped away Ryan's final disguise. The guests, who had once admired his fortune, now looked at him with pure disgust. But Ryan Mitchell was not one to give up easily. He threw his glass onto a nearby table, and it shattered everywhere. "Enough!" he yelled, his voice booming through the room. "You all think you know everything? You believe her? A bitter ex? You believe him? A nosy billionaire?" He pointed a shaky finger at Alexander. "You are all fools. I made this company, just me, and I am not going to let anyone bring it down." His voice started to break, showing his fear, but he kept going. "You say I am a criminal? Then prove it. Where are the cops? Where are the courts? This is my wedding, my party, and none of you." Before he could say another word, the main doors of the ballroom flew open. 2 police officers in uniform walked in, their badges shining in the bright light. Following them was a serious-looking detective in a dark suit, whose presence made everyone go quiet. Guests started whispering, some grabbing their jewelry, while others pulled out their phones, wanting to record this shocking moment. Ryan's face lost all its color. "What is going on?" he asked, his voice shaking. The detective came forward, taking a piece of paper from his coat. His voice was steady and official. "Ryan Mitchell, you are being investigated for embezzlement, tax evasion, and money laundering. We have a warrant for your arrest." The room gasped again, even louder this time. Camera flashes went off. Guests moved around, trying to see better. Ryan stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No, no, this cannot be happening. This is a setup. This is Harrington's work." Alexander's eyes grew cold, and he crossed his arms. "No, Ryan. This is karma finally finding you." Ryan looked around the room desperately, searching for support, for friends, for anyone who would help him. But the same people who had praised him earlier now looked away. The politicians quietly left through the back exits. Even his best friends took a step back, not wanting to get caught up in his downfall. "No!" Ryan screamed, trying to move forward as the police got closer. "Vanessa? Where is she? Vanessa, help me!" His voice became a weak, pitiful shout. But Vanessa had already left, and he was all alone. The officers grabbed his arms, putting handcuffs on him quickly and efficiently. He struggled against them. His confident image was completely gone, replaced by frantic denial. "This is not right. I am Ryan Mitchell. You cannot treat me like this. I have made millions. I have made history." The detective's voice cut him off. "You have made a huge mess, and now you are going to pay for it." The crowd began to murmur, with some people shaking their heads in disgust, and others saying this was a long time coming. Emily just watched, her children holding her close. For years, she had hoped for this moment, for everyone to see who Ryan really was. And now, under the fancy lights and cameras, he was exposed, not as a proud groom, but as a common criminal being led away from his own wedding. Ryan's eyes found Emily's as the officers took him toward the exit. His look was full of hate and terror. "This is not the end," he snarled, his voice echoing as they pulled him through the doors. "You are going to be sorry for this, Emily. You are all going to be sorry." But his words meant nothing, lost in the noise of the disgusted guests and the sound of the handcuffs. And when the doors closed behind him, the entire ballroom seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Ryan Mitchell had come to his party as a groom. He was leaving it as a prisoner. As Ryan was being taken out of the ballroom, Vanessa Brooks was already running down the marble staircase outside the hotel. Her heart was racing, her heels making sharp sounds on the stone as photographers surrounded her. She tried to cover her face, but the flashes of the cameras were everywhere. "Vanessa, did you know about his crimes? Are you really leaving him tonight? Was it all just about the money?" Their questions felt like attacks. She had imagined this night would be her greatest achievement, the night she finally entered the exclusive world of the rich and powerful. Instead, she was running away in disgrace, her expensive dress getting dirty on the ground. Her huge diamond ring was left behind on a table as she jumped into a nearby car, slamming the door shut while cameras banged on the window. Her hands shook as she made a call, her voice filled with desperation. "Victor, answer the phone," she whispered. Victor was her secret backup plan, a rich businessman she had been seeing behind Ryan's back. She had planned for Victor to be there for her if Ryan's business ever fell apart. But when he finally picked up, his voice was like ice. "Vanessa, I am not an idiot. Your name is already all over the news. Do you have any idea what this scandal would do to my career?" "Please, Victor, just hear me out," she pleaded. "I did not know anything about this. Ryan lied to me too. I am single now. We can be together. He just laughed, a cruel sound. Single? You are poison. Nobody wants to be associated with you. My reputation is more important than your pretty face. Do not ever call me again. The call ended. Vanessa just stared at her phone, her hope disappearing. She tried calling others, one by one, friends, other models, rich men she knew, but every call went unanswered or ended in a cold dismissal. Doors that once flew open for her were now firmly shut. By morning, the papers had branded her the gold-digging bride. Her furious exit from the hotel was on every cover, with headlines that mocked her. From diamonds to dirt, Vanessa Brooks ditches fiancé. The brands she represented quietly cut her loose. Her influencer contracts evaporated. To make matters worse, the bill collectors started calling. Vanessa had been living a life she could not pay for. Her credit cards were maxed out. Her designer clothes were bought with money she did not have. Without Ryan's stolen fortune, her fantasy life shattered. In just a few weeks, she had to sell her dresses, her jewelry, and even her car. Photographers snapped her in regular clothes, her hair a mess without makeup, an image the public enjoyed with cruel delight. The same people who had complimented her beauty now made fun of her ruin. Alone in a rundown apartment, far from the glamorous life she wanted, Vanessa saw her reflection in a cracked mirror. The woman looking back was not the glowing bride of a rich man. She was a warning to others. For the very first time, she saw the truth. She had staked her future on another person's deception. And when his deception fell apart, so did she. Vanessa Brooks thought she was getting a throne. Instead, she had tied herself to a sinking stone. And now, with no money, no friends, and no love, all she had was the sour feeling of her own failure. The grand hall was much calmer, but you could still feel the shock of what had just happened. Ryan was gone, taken away in handcuffs. Vanessa had fled in total shame. What was left was the shocked quiet of 100 guests, investors, politicians, and socialites, all of whom were staring at Emily Carter, the woman they had written off as unimportant. Emily stood in the center of it all, her triplets holding her dress, with Alexander standing firm beside her. She had endured her pain quietly for years. She had cried alone in the dark where no one could see. And now, under the bright chandeliers, she felt a sense of freedom so intense it almost made her legs give out. Her children stared up at her with big, trusting eyes, feeling that a huge change had occurred. One of her sons pulled on her hand. "Mommy, is everything okay now?" he asked softly. Her eyes filled with tears. She knelt down and pulled them all into a hug, kissing the tops of their heads. "Yes, my loves," she managed to say through her sobs. "We are finally safe." Mommy kept her promise. The guests, touched by the powerful emotion of the moment, grew silent once more. A few dabbed at their eyes. Others felt a pang of guilt for ever falling for Ryan's stories. For Emily, the past came flooding back. The long nights soothing 3 infants while she was starving. The exhausting days of hard labor. Hoping she could just make it to the end of her shift was over. The shame of being judged and whispered about. The pain of seeing Ryan's success all over the news while she used coupons just to get by. And through it all, she had made it. In fact, she had persevered. She stood up, and her tears were not a sign of weakness, but of victory. She faced the audience, her voice strong. "For a long time, I thought I was weak, that I was worthless without him. But tonight, I am here to prove I was wrong. Real strength is not about money or position. It is about what you can overcome. And I have overcome everything He used to try to break me. A few people started clapping, and soon the applause grew louder and louder. The sound was like a healing comfort for years of pain. Emily turned to Alexander, she said, her eyes glistening. Why? She asked softly. You had no reason to help me. Alexander's face softened, but a deep pain showed in his eyes. Because I know what cruelty does, he answered quietly. I saw it destroy my mother. I lost my wife to it. When I saw you, I could not let the same thing happen again. You deserve a real life, not just to survive. You deserve calm. And maybe I do too. Her throat felt tight, not with grief, but with a new, delicate hope. She had guarded her heart for so long, but his words began to break down those walls. The clapping grew, rolling through the huge room like a storm. Emily let the sound surround her, not as praise from others, but as proof of a truth she finally accepted. She had survived the worst and was now stronger for it. After all this time, she felt weightless, like a heavy burden was finally gone. Emily Carter, once thrown away and ignored, was finally her own person. The sound of applause faded, leaving a respectful quiet in its place. Every person looked at Alexander Harrington, who stood by Emily, her calm in the chaos. He held himself tall, but his face was kind. Still, the look in his eyes held a power that silenced the entire room. Alexander walked forward and carefully took the microphone from its stand. He faced Emily, and in that instant, the brilliant lights above seemed to fade, making her the only thing that shined. Tonight, Alexander started, his voice firm but full of feeling. We all saw the truth come out. We saw a woman bravely face down cruelty. We saw a mother fiercely protect her children. Emily Carter, you are so much stronger than you realize. And you do not have to do this alone anymore. Emily's eyes grew wide as she gasped. She held her children's hands tightly, unsure of what would happen next. Alexander knelt to be at eye level with the triplets. His look became gentle, and his voice was soft. Kids, I know I cannot replace what you lost, but I am making you a promise. I will always be there for you. I will keep you safe, guide you, and love you like you are my own. Guests whispered among themselves, moved by the honesty in every word he spoke. The triplets stared up at him with big eyes. One of them asked softly, "For real?" Alexander smiled, his own emotions making his lip quiver. For real. He then got up and faced Emily again. He put a hand inside his coat and took out a small, plush box. The guests gasped in surprise. Emily covered her mouth as her eyes welled up with tears. Emily, Alexander began, his voice cracking with emotion. I believed I could never love again. I locked my heart away with the memory of my wife, the grief for my mother, and the pain of betrayal. But then I met you. I saw your courage, your suffering, and your unbreakable love for your kids. And I began to heal. You showed me that love is not about being perfect. It is about being strong and never losing hope. He knelt down on one knee. The entire room went silent. I do not just want to support you this evening. I want to stand with you for the rest of our lives. Emily Carter, will you marry me and let me be the dad your kids deserve? The ballroom gasped, and then the room went completely still as everyone waited for her reply. Emily was crying freely now, tears streaming down her face. For years, she thought she did not deserve to be loved, that she would always be alone. But here was a man who understood suffering, who knew what loss felt like, and who saw her as complete, not damaged. She knelt down too, her kids right beside her, and said through her tears, "Yes, yes, I will." The applause that followed was deafening, louder than it had been all night. The guests were on their feet clapping, with many dabbing at their eyes. The children squealed with happiness and threw their arms around Alexander. He let out a happy laugh and gathered Emily and her kids into a big hug. And for the first time in so long, Emily felt something she had given up on, a hope for a future that was full of love, not fear. The wedding Ryan had designed to show off his success had become the moment of Emily's new beginning, and this time it was love, not hate, that took center stage. The ballroom, which had been a platform for Ryan's ego, was now filled with a new feeling. The heavy tension in the room just an hour ago was gone, replaced by clapping cheers and happy tears. Emily and Alexander held hands while the children happily held onto their mother's dress. The guests, the very people who had expected her to be humiliated, were now standing and applauding her. People came up to them, not to judge, but to offer sincere well wishes. A well-known businessman was the first to speak, nodding respectfully to Emily. "Mrs. Carter, please accept my apology. I fell for his lies. But you have shown us what real courage is." He then shook Alexander's hand with a firm grip. "And Harrington, you have made an excellent choice." More people came forward with kind words, some even crying as they said they were sorry for spreading rumors. Women in beautiful dresses hugged Emily and said that she had inspired them. Men who had previously celebrated Ryan now patted Alexander on the shoulder, recognizing his good character. For Emily, this outpouring of support was almost overwhelming. Years of gossip and mockery had left deep scars, but now those same people were speaking with admiration. It did not feel real. For the first time in a very long time, she was not just enduring her life quietly. She was being honored. The musicians, not sure what to play, slowly raised their instruments. With a small gesture from Alexander, they changed the music to a softer, more inviting tune. The melody filled the room. It was no longer music for an empty display, but for a true win. "Dance with me," Alexander whispered. Emily looked surprised. "Right here now," he said with a warm smile. "Of course, this night belongs to you. Let everyone see." He guided her to the middle of the marble floor. A circle of guests formed around them as Alexander put a steady hand on her waist, leading her into the music's rhythm. Emily was nervous at first, feeling every eye on her under the bright chandeliers, but his confident gaze made her fear disappear. Slowly she began to relax and move along with him. The triplets clapped their small hands, laughing, as nearby guests lifted them up, happy to keep them entertained. The image of Emily dancing, looking radiant and whole, brought tears to the eyes of many. This was more than a simple dance. It was a powerful statement. A woman who was once cast aside was now treasured, her dignity restored for all to see. When the song finished, the applause was even louder than before. Alexander leaned in, whispering just for her, "This is only the start. From now on, every party will be for you." Emily's heart felt full. For so many years, she had carried the weight of survival all by herself. Being promised happiness, a future filled with light, felt like the most precious gift imaginable. When she glanced across the room, she noticed something amazing. The public shaming Ryan had orchestrated had failed so completely that it had turned into her coronation. Emily was no longer the broke ex-wife. She was a mother, a survivor, and the woman standing with one of the city's most powerful figures. More importantly, she was finally standing proudly on her own 2 feet. The guests all raised their glasses. To Emily, someone yelled, "To strength and to love." The toast echoed in the large hall. Glasses chimed, laughter filled the air, and for the first time, in what felt like an eternity, Emily let herself laugh as well. A night that was supposed to destroy her had become the night that rebuilt her, and the festivities were just getting started. Outside the hotel, the street was bathed in flashing red and blue lights. Ryan Mitchell was being pushed into the back of a squad car. His hands were cuffed in steel. His angry shouts faded down the street, but no one was paying attention. The life he had built, with stolen funds and broken promises, had come crashing down, and now only the cold reality of a jail cell was waiting. The next morning, the news was on every paper and website. Groom arrested at his own wedding. The story of his embezzlement spread like a fire. Secret accounts, tax fraud, and washing millions through fake companies. Old friends abandoned him, investors pulled their money, and his business fell apart overnight. By the week's end, the name Ryan Mitchell was another word for fraud. In his cell, he seethed, blaming anyone but himself. He cursed Emily for coming, Alexander for exposing him, and Vanessa for deserting him. But in the quiet of his cell, when his rage had no audience, the truth haunted him. He had ruined himself. Vanessa's situation was no better. After her dramatic departure, she desperately tried to hold on to the last pieces of her fabulous life. But every door was slammed shut. Brands ended their contracts, and friends disappeared, and even the influential men she used for security now ignored her. The gossip magazines feasted on her fall from grace, from bride to bankrupt. In just a few months, Vanessa was broke. Collectors were calling constantly, debts grew, and the expensive lifestyle she loved became a painful memory. She sold her dresses, her jewelry, and even the very purse she once made fun of Emily for not having. Alone in a cheap apartment with no one left, she looked at her face in a cracked mirror. She understood she had become what she feared most, forgotten and worthless. While Ryan and Vanessa faced their ruin, Emily's life was just beginning to bloom. In the days following the wedding, people who once gossiped about her now said her name with admiration. Articles celebrated her courage, calling her the definition of a mother's strength. She got invitations to charity galas and women's shelters, all asking her to tell her story of overcoming hardship. But Emily did not want to be famous. The simple things mattered most to her. Tucking her kids in at night without being afraid, waking up to their laughter instead of worry, and knowing she did not have to face her struggles alone. Alexander was by her side through everything. He did not just talk about love, he showed it. He held the children's hands on the way to school, cheered for their small victories, and quietly helped Emily create a future for herself. He was the one who pushed her to open the foundation she had always dreamed of. A place to help single mothers get jobs, a place to live, and their self-respect back. They turned their shared pain into a new purpose. One evening, a few weeks later, Emily stood on the balcony of Alexander's house, watching the sun paint the sky gold. Her children were playing in the garden below, their laughter sounding like music. Alexander joined her, his hand warm in hers. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked her quietly. She turned to him, her eyes shining. "No, everything I went through nearly broke me. It did, but it also made me who I am and brought me to this life, to them and to you." For the first time in a very long time, Emily's heart was light. The past did not control her anymore. The shame did not hold her back. Ryan and Vanessa had lost everything. Emily had gained all that was truly important. And that was the best kind of victory. Months went by, but the night of Ryan's collapse was still fresh in everyone's minds. The story of the groom taken away in handcuffs at his own wedding became a well-known tale in the city. People talked about his arrogance, laughed about Vanessa's betrayal, and respected the quiet resilience of the woman who had once been written off. Emily Carter no longer walked with her head down or her shoulders slumped. She carried herself with a new dignity, not from the fancy clothes or the applause, but because she finally saw her own value. Each morning began with the sound of her children's giggles. Their little voices reminded her why her fight had been worth it. Their smiles were her reward, their love her greatest possession. With Alexander right there with her, Emily started to dream of the future again. They opened a foundation for single mothers, for women who had been abandoned, ignored, and mistreated just like she had been. The foundation gave them housing, training, and career help. Above all, it gave them hope. Emily stood on stages in front of audiences and told her story, not with shame, but with pride. She saw the tears in the eyes of women who finally felt they were not the only ones. But Emily's journey was not just for others. It was for her own healing. Late at night, after the kids were asleep, she and Alexander would sit near the fire, talking softly about their own scars. He told her about his mother's struggles, his late wife's battle with cancer, and the loneliness that had almost broken him. She told him about her darkest nights, her fear of failing her kids, and her moments of complete despair. In those quiet times, they found not just love, but a deep understanding. Two hurting souls who were no longer defined by their past pain, but made stronger by it. As for Ryan and Vanessa, their names became cautionary tales. Ryan's trial ended with a guilty verdict, and his once great company was gone. Vanessa faded away completely, a story of greed and disloyalty. Neither of them could escape the consequences of what they had done. One evening, as the sun went down and colored the sky with fiery gold, Emily gathered her children on the porch of their new home. Alexander stood behind her, his arm wrapped warmly around her shoulders. The children were laughing and pointing at the glowing clouds, calling them castles in the sky. Emily smiled, her eyes misty with quiet happiness. She whispered words to herself that she wished she had believed a long time ago. I am not weak. I am not broken. I am enough. She turned to Alexander, her voice full of confidence. Do you know what the real victory is? He tilted his head. What? It is not about getting revenge. It is not about watching them lose. It is knowing that I won. It is choosing to live a full life, love with all my heart, and never again question who I am. Alexander kissed her on the forehead. His response was simple, and you will never have to again. The triplets ran into her arms, giggling with pure, endless joy. Emily held them tight, her heart full of gratitude. For all the pain, for all the loss, life had brought her to this moment of true peace. And so, the story that began with such cruelty ended with such kindness. The tale of betrayal turned into a lesson about resilience. To every woman watching, Emily's journey has one last message. You are stronger than any storm that tries to knock you down. And no matter how bad the betrayal, no matter how heavy the pain, there is always a new day waiting for you to rise again. And that is how the story ends, my wonderful friends. You are still here with me, which means something in this story must have connected with your heart in a special way. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you of your own inner strength. Life often brings us betrayal, pain, and moments when we feel completely alone. But, as the wise philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find your strength. Emily's journey shows us that no matter how cruel the world can seem, we are never without power. We can rise, we can heal, and we can even turn our deepest wounds into the source of our greatest courage. So tonight, let this story be a reminder. You are stronger than the storms that try to break you. You deserve love, dignity, and a future that is much brighter than your past. And that is how the story ends, my wonderful friends. You are still here with me, which means something in this story must have connected with your heart in a special way. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you of your own inner strength. Let me take a moment to talk about what Emily's journey really teaches us, because this is not just entertainment. This is a mirror. The first lesson is about the danger of building your identity on someone else's approval. Emily spent years believing she was nothing without Ryan. She quit her job for him. She gave up her independence for him. She shaped her entire world around a man who saw her as disposable. And when he left, she did not just lose a husband, she lost herself. How many of us have done this? How many of us have handed the keys to our self-worth to someone who did not even deserve to hold our hand? The moment Emily started to rebuild was not when Alexander showed up. It was when she looked at her 3 children and decided that their future mattered more than her fear. That was the real turning point. Not the billionaire, not the dress, not the revenge. It was a mother sitting on a broken couch in a dark apartment, choosing to fight when every part of her wanted to give up. The second lesson is about the illusion of power. Ryan Mitchell believed that money made him untouchable. He thought his wealth gave him the right to treat people like objects, to throw away his pregnant wife, to mock her suffering, and to invite her to his wedding just to watch her break. But real power is not built on cruelty. Real power is not built on stolen money or fake smiles. Real power is what Emily had all along. It is the ability to endure what would destroy most people and still wake up the next morning and feed your children. It is the ability to walk into a room full of people who expect you to crumble and instead stand tall with your head held high. Ryan's power was an illusion, and like all illusions, it disappeared the moment someone turned on the lights. The third lesson, and perhaps the most important one, is about what revenge really means. Emily did not go to that wedding to destroy Ryan. She went to reclaim her dignity. There is a huge difference. Revenge is about hurting someone else. Reclaiming your dignity is about healing yourself. Emily did not need Ryan to suffer in order to feel whole again. She needed the world to see who she really was. She needed her children to see their mother standing proud instead of hiding in shame. And she needed to hear her own voice, strong and clear, telling the truth for the first time. The fact that Ryan's empire collapsed that night was not Emily's doing. It was the natural consequence of a life built on lies. When you build your house on stolen ground, you do not need an enemy to bring it down. The ground itself will swallow it. And then there is the lesson about Vanessa. Some people will look at Vanessa and feel satisfaction watching her fall. But the truth is, Vanessa's story is a warning, not a joke. She tied her entire future to a man she did not love, for money she did not earn, and a life she could not sustain. When that man fell, she had nothing to stand on because she had never built anything of her own. Vanessa did not lose Ryan's money. She lost the years she could have spent building her own identity, her own career, her own sense of worth. The saddest part of Vanessa's story is not that she ended up alone in a cheap apartment. It is that she never learned the lesson Emily already knew. Your value does not come from what you wear, who you marry, or how much money is in your bank account. Your value comes from who you are when everything is taken away. The wise philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find your strength." Emily realized this in the hardest way possible. She could not control Ryan's cruelty. She could not control the gossip. She could not control the poverty or the exhaustion or the loneliness. But she could control one thing. She could choose to keep going. She could choose to love her children harder than the world hurt her. She could choose to walk through that door with her head held high, even when her knees were shaking. And that choice, that single, stubborn, beautiful choice, changed everything. So tonight, let this story be a reminder, not just a story you listen to, but a truth you carry with you. You are stronger than the storms that try to break you. You deserve love, dignity, and a future that is much brighter than your past. And no matter how dark your night has been, the sunrise is already on its way. If this story touched your heart, do me a small favor. Hit that like button, not for me, but for every woman out there who needs to hear that she is not alone. Share this video with someone who is going through a hard time right now. Leave a comment and tell me, what moment in Emily's story hit you the hardest? I read every single comment, and your words might be the exact thing someone else needs to see tonight. And if you have not subscribed yet, join this family, because here, we do not just tell stories. We remind each other how to keep going, how to stand up, and how to rise again. I will see you in the next one. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful life lessons and emotional value to our audience. All characters, names, locations, and events in this story are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, or actual events is purely coincidental. This story is created solely for entertainment and educational purposes. Viewer discretion is advised.